Welcome back to Lobby Concessionals, the movie podcast where nobody's right and everybody's wrong. I'm Parker, and that's Brendan. Make sure to follow us along, like and subscribe. This is our, I think, 7th main episode. So, we're getting the training wheels off,
You might be.
Yeah, actually, I think I had the training wheels off way later in my real life. So
I'm adding more wheels on as we go.
Like I said, follow us along. Enjoy the content. Today, I figured we'd start off as all good wedding speeches do, with a definition.
Oh my god! Are we doing a whole episode on wedding crashers?
If we're not, we should. So nostalgia is defined as a sentimental longing for the past or events in the past. Oh man, I looked up how to say this and now I completely forget. Anomia, anomia, I think is what it is a feeling of nostalgia for a time you've never experienced.
Oh, so, I got a lot of that going on.
Really?
Oh
really?
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever had that personally. I'm not a big guy that's like, man, I really wish I existed in the 60s before, the Civil Rights Act was signed. That would have been really cool.
That's also really specific. It kind of says a lot about you.
Yeah. It says that I want black people to have rights. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. So I think some of that's kind of interesting, but anyway, if it was not already clear, we are going to be talking about nostalgia today, and nostalgia in movies, good, bad, and otherwise. I don't know what's otherwise, but
indifference.
Sure. Yeah. So in general, Brendan, what's been your experience with nostalgia? Are you nostalgic for a particular time, for a particular film, particular
anything?
Yeah, hit me.
To be fair, I'm probably overly nostalgic about everything. I'm a guy that still collects Transformers, G.I. Joe, and Ninja Turtles on a regular basis.
Though those are three things, not everything. But
but I just mean I don't. I'm also a guy that doesn't let go of things. Everybody, we've talked before about how I collect comics, and everybody has the stories like, oh man, I used to collect comics, and then in high school, I discovered girls, and then I stopped collecting comics, or I went to college and I couldn't do it.
And you still haven't discovered girls?
No, I gave up the girls for comics. But I never gave that stuff up. It's something I still watch wrestling because I watched wrestling since I've been watching wrestling since I was 5.
Wow.
I have a hard time letting go of that stuff. So anything that gives me kind of that comfort. So nostalgia is huge.
Okay.
Huge for me.
Interesting. Do you it shows in your movie watching habits?
Yeah, I think so. I think I have we've talked about a bunch of movies on this show now, and I have a lot of blind spots for them. I think in one of the early episodes I was wearing a Clueless shirt, and whether or not that movie has aged well or not, that's a movie I'll take on a deserted island with me.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I definitely have nostalgia for movies, for certain films as well, and maybe to the point of being a little bit blinded by whether or not they've aged well.
Okay, fair enough. I have, I think, similar feelings about certain films that I literally can't think of any now that you've mentioned this.
Probably that second Spider-Man movie.
The Raimi one?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, sorry. I mean, I can think of things I have nostalgia for.
Yeah.
I just mean in terms of having a blind spot for them.
And gotcha.
In giving them credit where they shouldn't have credit. Actually, you know what? No.
Yeah.
I already can. Yeah. Liar Liar is a movie that I watched a lot as a kid and loved it.
Yeah.
It's, I think, still a very good movie.
Yeah.
And I think it's very funny. But there's definitely bits in there that haven't aged as well.
Yeah.
Another one is, I don't even know if people know of this, but The Rundown with The Rock and Sean William Scott. Yeah. Big fan of that movie. Literally saw it playing in a bar the other day. And I was stoked. And I'm like, man, there's no way this is as good as I remember it.
And it probably wasn't.
But I guarantee I could put up that movie again and still have a great time.
Yeah. I mean, we could go another 20 minutes about Avatar if you want.
Oh, yeah. We got to, right? No, I'm not even going to get into Avatar. I'm not even going to. So, anyway, I think nostalgia is important. I think, for me personally, I find the new Star Wars films, the sequels, that trilogy perfectly encapsulates the whole rainbow of nostalgia to me. That first one, Force Awakens, does an incredible job capturing the whimsy and the fun of Star Wars, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That store is amazing. Everything about it screams Star Wars.
Yeah.
There's, I was bawling my eyes out in the theater the first time I watched that, probably the first 3 or 4 times I watched that, because it was exactly what I want Star Wars to be. Now, unfortunately, some of that film and some of that nostalgia and feeling is tainted because of I guess partially because of what came later, because of the unfortunateness of that trilogy as a whole, but also because I recognize now that that movie unfortunately didn't do enough narratively to set up those other films. It is part of the problem, as opposed to being I would still probably rank it as my favorite of those 3.
Sure.
But it's part of the problem. And then we get to Last Jedi, and I think that is filmmaking wise the best film of the 3. And I think Last Jedi does an incredible job encapsulating what is Star Wars and that feeling of Star Wars, while doing new things. So I think that ideally Last Jedi is a good encapsulation of what nostalgia should be.
Okay.
They've clearly taken something. It's not just nostalgia points.
Yeah.
And it still feels like it, but it's a new creation. That's a totally new and different thing than, Force Awakens feels like a rehash of New Hope.
Yeah.
And then we get to Rise of Skywalker. And this, in my opinion, is bad nostalgia. This is nostalgia gone wrong, where people have now, for whatever reason, decided that they didn't like Last Jedi, didn't like what they did with the story, and Rise of Skywalker shoves that all to the side and goes, "You guys are right," and basically says, "Whatever you need as fans, we will give to you, and not give you anything creatively worthwhile."
Yeah.
And so that seems entirely nostalgia fueled and 0%. Creatively inducing or worthwhile. So for me, that's the perfect gradient of it, of films that are,
I mean, it's hard to argue against any of those points. I think you did a really good job of picking out something that is tangible and explains everything you kind of want to talk about.
Sure, totally.
We probably just did lose all of our viewership with a hot Star Wars take. But again, I do think it's I agree with you pretty much. I mean, I think the difference is I like Last Jedi better than Force Awakens, because I think giving me something new while reminding me it's in that universe puts it over the top in terms of a fresh feeling. So I want it fresh at that point. So I think I like Last Jedi better than Force Awakens, and I think that's the only slight disagreement I have with what you said there.
Well, and I think it goes to show again that just the power of that nostalgia, because Last Jedi does a good job with nostalgia, but does it in a way that gives us something new. Well, Force Awakens buys into, and I think does a good job with nostalgia, but it's entirely fueled on that.
Yeah.
And so because of the power of nostalgia, I think that movie's forever going to be better, in my opinion, or I'm going to love it more.
Yeah.
Simply because they gave me exactly what I wanted in a way that didn't feel cheap, like it did in Rise of Skywalker.
Sure, absolutely.
And I think when, I think that's something similar. You mentioned Spider-Man. In Spider-Man No Way Home, potential spoilers, I guess. I think that it's been all over social media enough that everyone knows.
Yeah.
But all 3 filmed Spider-Men. All 3 Spider-Men that have appeared in film appear in No Way Home.
Yeah.
And that was incredible. Even though I knew it was going to happen, even though I knew it, enough had been spoiled about it. it was a great moment, and that level, the nostalgia of that, of those Raimi films, stuck with me for sure.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of my childhood, so that was a big deal. And obviously it sustains that film, and I think that film has enough going on in there that it isn't entirely fueled by that, but it gives it a huge boost, you know?
Yeah.
So do you have any examples, any things in your life where...
I just want to take it back for a hot second.
Okay,
I wonder does time away help? You know, if we're talking about Force Awakens being, for you at least, a really good use of nostalgia, is that given way by the idea that it had been 10 years between Star Wars films?
Had it only been 10 years?
2005 is Revenge, so 2015.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, 10 years, fair enough.
And then, you know, for the Spider-Man, having not seen Tobey since 2008.
7, I think.
7? And then
7.
And then I guess we're 4 years removed from Andrew, or is it even more than that?
I think it probably would have been
2012
more, because it might have even been 4 years since Tom's first.
Yeah, so wires crossed there. But does time away help your nostalgia?
I think it's a crucial part. I don't think that's a part of it in the Spider-Man case, because I don't think it's enough time, and we had lots of Spider-Man in between, you know, and there's lots of Spider-Man content. He's in theme parks, he's in multiple animated shows. I think there's literally like 7
something like
that he's starring in.
Yeah.
He has probably like Spider-Man as a character, regardless of whether it's Peter or Miles, but he's got like 8 or 9 active comic runs at any given time.
Yeah, but this is a Tobey thing specifically, right?
Sure, absolutely. And so I think the big thing for me, what makes that a little bit different is it's not like I missed Spider-Man. I did miss those 2 people, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. But I think for me, really, I grieved for Andrew Garfield because I felt like he did an amazing job as the character, and then was cut short because of various decisions made by the studio, story decisions in that second film. So that's brutal. And I think that seeing him being able to close off some of that narrative was really, really important.
Yeah.
And I feel like that for Tobey as well, even though I felt like the Tobey narrative was far more concluded. Like it wasn't. There was a plan for a Spider-Man 4, but I didn't need it personally, and I was happy with where that trilogy put him.
Yeah.
But it was great to be able to check back in with him and see him as the same continuing character. You know, I don't think a lot of films have really done that in the same way. So utilize nostalgia to that same effect. You know.
Yeah.
I do think there's a level of nostalgia is used poorly when it feels like it hasn't been long enough. That it sort of, I think again, it cheapens the experience. I think it's easy for nostalgia to cheapen an experience versus making it better.
Sure.
As I think one of the most gratuitous nostalgia examples is Ready Player One. So the movie came out in 2018. It is filled with pop culture reference. Like literally that movie doesn't exist unless you have nostalgia for the 80s effectively. Now the movie does a better job than the book in putting it across multiple decades, right? Like it's not just the 80s. Definitely there is a focus on that still, but there is lots of characters and Easter eggs and stuff in there that's from the last decade, from 2 decades ago. Yeah. You know, so there's a lot to work off of in there. But what I find really interesting about this is that effectively that book ends up kind of being a love letter in some ways to Spielberg. And then Spielberg directs it, and it still comes out like there's no reason that movie should be as disappointing and underwhelming as it is.
It's gratuitous.
Yeah.
And to the point where it feels like a giant commercial.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And like I personally, have you read the book?
Yes.
I really enjoyed the book.
Yeah.
I find I've read Ready Player 2, and it was terrible as far as I was concerned. It was just cringy and weird. And unfortunately, in hindsight, it brings up some of the cringy, weird stuff that happens in the first one. And like in particular, Wade, the main character's interactions and relationships with women. But I thought it was endearing in that first one because it seemed like by the end of the film or end of the movie, end of the book, even end of the story, that he was supposed to, he was learned a little bit. Like, hey, maybe I shouldn't treat women this terribly, or like women are people, you know? And unfortunately, Ready Player 2 delves straight back in. Like, he hasn't learned anything. And it's like, oh, okay, so we've gone nowhere. Like, the arc meant nothing.
Yeah.
Either way, I quite enjoyed the original book.
Yeah.
I thought there was a lot of fun there. I thought it was worthwhile. But all of the fun and luster of that just gets leached straight out in the film, as far as I'm concerned. Like, I agree. If it seems like a giant commercial as opposed to something that should exist for its own right.
I mean, I didn't like the book as much as you did. I think I fell into the hype train just a little too much, and it didn't really live up to the standards of the bar. And so going into it, I was already pretty indifferent. I didn't love the book. I didn't hate the book.
Oh, okay.
But I hated that movie.
Yeah.
I hated that movie.
And you're a big Spielberg guy.
I'm a huge Spielberg guy. If you want to talk nostalgia, we can talk nostalgia in terms of Spielberg stuff. Like, what's that word? The word that you couldn't just...
oh, boy. Are we going to make me do it again?
I'm going to make you do it again.
Anomia? Anomia.
Yeah.
It's pronounced differently than it looks. So,
or you said anomia.
It could be anomia.
Okay. Either way, Spielberg is my biggest proponent of that. Like,
okay.
It's something I never had was kids on bikes, white picket fences, hanging out with your friends after school and all that stuff when you grew up with a crew of kids. So like that Spielberg trope, when you're with the crew of Goonies or whatever.
The
like
E.T. thing.
The E.T. thing.
Yeah.
Super 8, which JJ, obviously drew a lot of... Spielberg stuff from. The
newest is Stranger Things. But
Stranger Things, absolutely.
Thing, but very clearly is
and that's a thing that I have nostalgia for that I never had. So Spielberg is the tippity top of my nostalgia bait in that sense.
In what decade is that for?
That's for the 80s. I mean, it was an 80s thing.
So you were in that decade, but just didn't experience those things.
No, we didn't. We moved around. Like, we had moved around when I was younger and stuff like that. So we never settled in a space or anything like that. And my family was untrustworthy of other people. So friends and hanging out unsupervised was not a weird thing. So when I talked to other people of my age, they were like, "Yeah, man, we just ran around and did stuff and nobody knew where we were until dinner, and then after dinner we just disappeared again." I'm like, I don't know what that is.
Like, it's kind of like that Stephen King thing too. He really leans into some of that too. The kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a little bit of that I love and I never got to experience. So again, so Spielberg is a big nostalgia thing for me. So this movie, I don't know that I was excited going into it because it felt like a bit of a paycheck for him.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's fine. Everybody's entitled to make money their own way and stuff like that. I just get a little disappointed sometimes when it's a creative that I enjoy just kind of phoning it in a little bit. And I don't want to say that he didn't put work into it.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
Or anything like that. I mean, spoiler for a shitty movie, but like the end scene with him in the room is the most Spielberg part of that movie.
With Wade in collecting the egg.
Yeah.
You mean? Yeah. Okay.
Right. Or the attic, or with the room with all the posters and the toys and all that stuff.
That's
the most Spielberg part of that movie, and that kind of gets to me. And that it's not enough to wash away the other 2.5 hours of that fucking shit.
Yeah. It's a lot. That's a lot of movie to wash away. That's a good point. So do you think this is a new thing? Like, nostalgia is something that's sorry, I'm sort of setting up here because I have an answer to this, and now I'm just gonna see if you're wrong. Like, do you feel like it's been increasing, or it's something that's been relied upon more recently, or?
Well, it depends, I guess, what you mean by more recently. Like, what are we talking about?
Last 2 decades? I don't know.
Last 2 decades, I'd say. I think if you want to put a pin on it, I'd say that first Transformers movie, the first Michael Bay Transformers movie, is a good start to a lot of efforts in the movie industry, at the very least. I think you always have TV stuff. You're like, every couple of years there's a new Ninja Turtles TV show.
Sure.
Every couple of years there's a Transformers thing. But movie-wise, I think that movie being successful kind of kicked the door down for a lot of people to try it.
Yeah, and my argument would be Transformers does it well, actually. So that movie comes out in 2007. It's 21 years after the... there's 2 Transformers animated films, and one of them, I believe, is called The Transformers. Or no, Transformers, the animated movie. Is
Just the movie.
The movie, thank you. Yeah.
Just the movie.
So the one with Orson Welles.
Yeah.
So it's 21 years after that. I feel like they've waited. And there was definitely some TV in there. We had Beasties and stuff.
Yeah.
And a few different Transformers.
Beast Wars for people who aren't Canadian.
But a few different Transformers adjacent properties on TV.
Sure.
But that's truly the return to,
Yeah.
Optimus Prime. This is and so I feel like that movie does a good job with nostalgia. In that it didn't feel cheap to me. It felt like this was something we were seeing for the first time. And it was like we hadn't had a live action Transformers. And yeah, but you're right. I think it sort of sets something off there.
Yeah. Again, I think especially it being successful. I think had that movie bombed, I think we wouldn't be having this conversation as much. Yeah.
And, so when I was doing some research for this, what I found interesting was that nostalgia has been used in film for forever and way more than I thought it was. Like, I think it is definitely increasing, and there has been far more recently. But what I found interesting is, even American Graffiti comes out in 1973. It is nostalgic for the decade prior. Yeah. So the tagline for that film is literally, "Where were you in the summer of '62?"
Yeah.
Even then, I'm like, well, yeah, they couldn't have nostalgia in the '70s. What happened? They're going to be nostalgic for the war.
Yeah. Well, Lucas is a really good example of only making things that are nostalgic to himself. Right?
Yeah, sure.
If you talk about American Graffiti, and then all the Star Wars were his imagination things, and Indiana Jones is his love of pulp adventures and all that stuff. So that's a guy who's completely fueled by his own nostalgia.
And to everyone's success. First of all, obviously the massive success
of that is him. American Graffiti.
Correct. George Lucas, famous American Graffiti director. So obviously the financial success and the critical success of Star Wars. But on top of that, we all benefited as individuals. Star Wars, obviously massive impact on culture. But we only get that because of George's nostalgia.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting. And it's, again, it shows that this isn't a new phenomenon. And even it's not even exclusively about toys and stuff. Look at even Martin Scorsese goes back to his Paul Newman's character in Color of Money.
Yeah.
From The Gambler. What's the
Hustler?
The Hustler.
Yeah.
Man, I was so close.
Yeah.
So close.
Oh.
But even he returns to a classic character, and there's nostalgia for that initial film there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So someone that's truly a little more hoity-toity potentially, or a little more cinematic.
Yeah.
He's a true artist, and even he is this is an important tool.
I mean, every director, I think, if you're paying an homage to somebody, I think you're doing it out of nostalgia, right?
Sure.
And at the end of the day, if you want to take a newer example, go back to Spielberg and West Side Story.
Yep.
I mean, that's his favorite movie of all time. And I wouldn't ever have the balls to be like, I'm going to go remake my favorite movie, which happens to be one of the most beloved movies of all time.
Yeah.
That.
Especially when you're not going to do a great job of it.
Well, I don't know. Well, that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's nostalgia fueled. A bit of nostalgia mixed with a little bit of ego, maybe.
Totally. Sure.
Yeah.
And how can you not have an ego with the career that guy's had, though? I don't blame him at all. That's what I'm saying. So how do you feel about the recent spat of, and again, this is a little bit of recency bias. This is a little bit because we've just gone through a pandemic. We're just starting to get movies that we should have had previously.
Yeah.
But it does seem like there is a whole chunk of films that are relying exclusively on nostalgia in, a short time here. So my examples I've got prepared, which there's
of
probably
course.
many. But so Spider-Man No Way Home is a great example.
Sure.
It comes out December 2021. Another in December 2021 is the Matrix Resurrections. Comes out 18 years after the end of the original trilogy. And
That's already laughing.
you're laughing?
Already laughing with the
yeah.
Matrix stuff. Well, that's a good conversation.
The interesting thing with the Matrix too is the story's wrapped up. Like, the Spider-Man stuff, I'm like, yeah, I get it. First of all, because I'm always going to make an exception for Spider-Man. And then secondly, because I did feel like there was more to add there. Like, I felt like it was something. Now, in fairness, I haven't seen the Matrix Resurrections.
Yeah.
But those stories were
finished.
Tied up with a bow.
Yeah.
We were fine.
Yeah.
Ghostbusters Afterlife, same thing. This is happening 32 years after Ghostbusters 2. 5 years after the all-female reboot.
Yeah.
They're not connected.
No.
But like it's I feel like that's enough time. However, again, disclaimer, I haven't seen the new Ghostbusters film, but I didn't hear
we could talk about it.
A lot of good things about it. Or enough good things that it was like, oh, I absolutely need to rush out and see this. You know? Top Gun Maverick coming out 2022.
Oh, baby.
36 years after the original.
Your favorite. You can't wait.
Oh, yeah. Top Gun sucks, but Maverick's going to be dope. Indiana Jones 5 comes out next year, theoretically. Yeah. They literally don't even have a name for it yet. No. So, let's see if we'll see it next year. 34 years after the original trilogy finishes.
Yeah.
15 years after Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which we generally can avoid.
15 years.
15 years shocked me. Like, it seems like it should have been way earlier than that, but it's, so they decided to go back to that old well. And that was basically, anyway, I've listed 5 things that are coming out, either already came out in the last 3 months. No, more than that. Anyway, but we've got 5 movies that are coming out within like a year, 2 years, let's call it. That are all entirely based on nostalgia.
Yeah. This is gonna be a little bit rambly because I have a lot of thoughts. I think you did a really good job there of picking out a couple franchises that do it for a lot, that tickle a lot of different nostalgia things.
Sure, totally.
As opposed to just one thing.
Yeah.
So the Matrix stuff, let's start with that because at the end of the day, I don't know who asked for it.
Totally. Yeah.
Right? That's the thing. It's like, you're right. Those movies were concluded and 2 of the 3 movies aren't looked fondly upon.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, so, I think Reloaded, maybe people look at it and go, oh, okay.
Yeah,
maybe. It's like a mediocre thing.
Sure.
Well, I think very few people will take the Matrix Revolutions and go, this is a film worth defending.
Yeah. So 18 years after the fact, I don't know who that movie services. Is it it's not to get a new generation of Matrix fans.
Maybe it is.
I don't know. There's not enough Spencer's Gifts out there to sell me leather trench coats. So that's a very, very strange one to me. The Ghostbusters stuff, and I'm going to preface this. I love the Ghostbusters. Okay, I'm a bigger fan of the animated series because that's what I grew up with.
Okay,
but it always catches me off guard. That is one of the more passionate fan bases out there when it's been 2 movies and people don't like the second movie.
Yeah, correct.
So it's one movie. And people put up just the biggest stink about that franchise.
Totally.
So when you talk about the all-female reboot, which, you know what? Hell, I enjoyed it. Whatever. It's not a bad movie.
I also enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it more than Ghostbusters 2.
That's tough, but, that's rough.
Yeah, we can move on.
But again, the amount of protesting that came out of that movie because people wanted something new. Is it nostalgia bait because it's using the name and you're giving something completely different? Sure. But we're so far removed from the original 2 where one movie isn't well liked. So basically it's the strength of a franchise on one movie. That's every movie, guys. I don't know what you're asking for. I really don't. So Afterlife comes out and it's it's the rise of Skywalker to the Last Jedi. We're just going to ignore this last one, and give you what we think you want because you've been so loud and obnoxious about it.
Yeah.
And it's a fine movie. I didn't hate it. I think it's pretty good. I do think it's nostalgia baity in the wrong ways. Like they in the movie they use the original score a lot.
Oh, okay.
And it doesn't fit.
Oh.
It's just in weird moments. Like it takes me right out of the movie because you're just shoehorning in a reminder every 5 minutes that this is the Ghostbusters you love. And it would have been fine if you didn't. Because I think the rest of the story is good enough to stand on its own, and the characters are good enough to stand on its own. You don't have to keep reminding me that you fucked it.
Yeah, totally.
Indiana Jones, I mean, you're just going to milk the cash cow until you milk the cash cow, which is, again, a weird thing to say about a franchise that had 4 movies in the span of 30-something odd years. Almost 40-something years now, right?
Yeah.
But I think for better... I just wish, I don't mind nostalgia in terms of studios putting stuff out. I just wish they'd take their time and use it properly.
Yeah.
And Snake Eyes is a really good example of bullshit.
The G.I. Joe origin film?
Yeah, the one that just came out. They announced that they're doing a Snake Eyes movie. I'm like, that could be cool. You don't have to worry about all the other characters and introducing just a whack load of characters that people don't know.
Yeah.
You just focus on the one dude that doesn't talk and is just ninja and fights. I'm like, that's great.
Yeah.
And then they announced Henry Golding. I'm like, oh, so they're just going to show his face.
Okay.
Which is the entire premise of Snake Eyes.
Yeah.
And then he shows the trailer where he talks and he does things. I'm like, it's tough. I get it. It's an origin movie.
Yeah.
But it's not the origin I wanted. I needed. Like as a G.I. Joe fan, I'm not a big Snake Eyes guy to begin with.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, if you're gonna use the name for nostalgia, then why don't you just make it what it's supposed to be?
It strikes me a little bit like the X-Men Origins Wolverine thing, like where really what Fox realized is that Wolverine is the most popular character in those films and those stories. Really,
sure.
Like I think he's probably still the most recognizable X-Men anyway, if not the most popular. And they were like, yeah, let's just make a movie about him. And it really strikes me as something like it's a money grab. It doesn't strike me as something that needs to exist for any real reason.
And not just a money grab, but like I don't understand the train of thought to be like, we're gonna take the most popular character of these movies, give him his own movies, and then we're gonna put a whole bunch of other characters in them just to try to make some more money for action figures or whatever it might be.
Oh, sure.
And so let's take another really popular character, put him in this movie, and then take away the one thing he's known for. His mouth.
Oh, you mean Deadpool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put him in the movie and take away his and then let's also just hire a guy who's known for being really good looking and has a really witty mouth.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Scar him up and take away his mouth.
Yeah.
I just don't get it. I don't understand the train of thought, and I don't understand what the decision process is because it makes no sense to me.
Well, and in fairness to them, he is in that movie, like Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson as Deadpool is in that movie for the first half, really.
Yeah.
With normal him.
Yeah.
Like it's handsome looking Ryan Reynolds,
sure.
And he's making jokes. And so, like, you do get a benefit of that actor and his talents, at least for the first half. The fact that they sabotage that completely is crazy to me, especially considering that we have the massive successes of Deadpool and Deadpool 2. That, like, again, with the benefit of hindsight, it's like, what were you thinking?
Yeah,
like,
why didn't somebody get fired for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I agree. So I think it's very possible to do nostalgia wrong.
Yeah.
So where do you have instances where it's been done right? Like you mentioned George Lucas, and I think another one sort of in that same vein is Quentin Tarantino. I feel like all of his films are effectively love letters to other films he enjoyed.
Yeah.
There's a bit. Now I'm just going to go off on a tangent a bit here, so just bear with me. There's a portion in Inglourious Bastards where they do like an intro to one of the bastards. and his name is Hugo Stiglitz, and they do like a supercut of his like greatest hits, effectively, of him hunting down Nazis, and they like show a banner Hugo Stiglitz multiple times, and it's like, this is strange, like it's weird that they're doing this. The name Hugo Stiglitz is taken from a actor who made a whole bunch of, I believe, Spanish zombie films in the 60s, I believe.
Yeah.
And Tarantino loves him. So he was just like, we're just going to crib that guy's name and shove it into this.
Yeah.
And like, that's not a reference anyone gets.
No.
You know, like the only reason I found that out is because I looked around on the internet one time, you know? So what I think is really interesting about Tarantino is this is nostalgia for Tarantino's sake, for no one else. You know, like he's like, I want to make this because I want to make this.
Well, I mean, we touched on it earlier, right? I feel like when nostalgia's done right, it's done for a reason. And guys like Tarantino, Lucas, Spielberg are making films nostalgic for themselves, and they're not going out of their way to make it nostalgic for anybody else. So when you try to appease an entire group, an entire audience, I think is where it starts to get really tricky. You know?
Oh, sure.
You know, so you know, when you start pumping out Transformers movies because one was successful, then you start to lose track of what that idea actually is, and you have to do a reset. And you know, when you ask me what's a really good one, it's Bumblebee.
Yep.
Bumblebee's a great reset. Like, I mean, whether you like that movie or not, Optimus looks like Optimus. He sounds like Optimus. Bumblebee is a VW bug.
Yeah.
It's set in the 80s with a great soundtrack. So it's everything it should be. And it's set in the right time, and it feels right. And it feels right. And then you can tell that it's a bit of a love letter from the director, Travis Knight.
Yeah.
Right? But there's a soullessness to nostalgia bait for the nostalgia bait's sake.
So I'm curious, in your opinion, is the reason that the multiple Transformers films feel nostalgia baity and feel soulless, is that because they are nostalgia baity, or like
no?
they're using nostalgia wrong?
So here's the thing.
Or is that Michael Bay?
Okay, so I think there's 6 Transformers movies now.
That is a great guess.
I've watched 5 of them,
okay,
and 3 of them are Bumblebee.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I haven't watched 2, 3, and 4. Okay. I watched last night out of like a cheap day that was just like out of curiosity, kind of a thing, and I regret it. I absolutely regret it. And the first movie I watched and I enjoyed the first time, and I watched it pretty quickly after the second time, and I realized I don't know that it was for me. Like I think it's very much a nod to what was before and to move things forward, but there's definitely, and then so to talk about 2, 3, and 4 is really tough. But when I'm watching 5, the Transformers are unrecognizable. There's no nostalgia bait there. The nostalgia bait is the name.
Oh, okay.
Right. There's nothing there to remind me that I used to love these robots that used to be cars.
Right.
There's nothing there. So I just think, you know, you found a formula, whatever it might have been, that just unrecognizable robots because they just look atrocious. Whatever that design is, I hate. And maybe that's the nostalgia. I mean, this is where nostalgia starts working against you actively, because you're so far removed from what it was before that you're actively taking me right out of it. Right out of it. So I think the problem with the Transformers movies is I don't think they're close enough to the Transformers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so this isn't even a Michael Bay issue, really. Like, effectively, it's that they are using nostalgia incorrectly. Like, it's not. It's no longer being used to defuel the film. It's just there as the bumper on the trailer. Yeah. You know, it's effectively the name.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And I think it like you mentioned, it really comes across as soulless when you get a movie like Bumblebee that admires and respects those characters, and treats them the way they're supposed to be treated. Now, granted, don't get me wrong, there's something soulless about Transformers as a thing. You know, like, it's a show that was made to sell toys. You know, like,
and the thing is, we're talking like there's right and wrong here, and there isn't. It's a creative decision.
Absolutely.
If you want to take it a new route, if you want to use that first movie, remind me that Optimus exists and Peter Cullen's great and all that stuff, and then take in a brand new direction, which we talked about earlier, which is what I wanted. It's just this time I didn't. Maybe it was too far one way or not close enough the other way. Whatever it is, it wasn't what I wanted. But that's not to say it's the wrong move. It made $1 bazillion as a franchise. That's the right move.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of the reason it feels wrong and cheap is because of Michael Bay. Like, effectively, those movies become a Michael Bay film, they're not Transformers films.
Yeah. He's kind of taken over as ownership.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I believe he is walking away from them, is my understanding.
Yeah, he's not doing the new one.
Oh, he's not?
No. He's probably got a producer credit. Probably.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I'm excited for the new one.
Good to hear. So we've kind of talked over this a little bit. Do you have instances, a particular creator that you think does nostalgia properly? Or, again, we talked about Spielberg, but is his stuff nostalgic, or are you nostalgic for his stuff?
That's a really good question. Like Spielberg wise, I think I'm nostalgic for his stuff.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I mean, his stuff is nostalgic to himself, but I cannot relate. I can't relate being like, man, when I saw the original West Side Story in theaters for the first time, paying my 15 cents and my sody pop. I just can't relate to what that would be like. Right. So
sure.
I love the idea that he got to go and do it. But when I think of that stuff, it's the Goonies, and it's I know that's not like a Spielberg film, but it's a Spielberg production.
Yeah.
But I secret code words and tree houses and bikes and that stuff. Spielberg is right there. But I and even that's such a small window when I think about it, right? Because he goes very quickly from like E.T. to like Schindler's List.
Yeah.
And that's a different type of nostalgia.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally.
So,
and like Jurassic Park. Like,
I
didn't think he was that old. It's nostalgic for a time when dinosaurs roamed.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he's saying something about his dad. I don't
know. So, speaking of Spielberg, though, I'm curious then. Effectively, I think a lot of J.J. Abrams stuff is nostalgic for Spielberg. How do you feel about a film like Super 8 or really anything that JJ has done? That
I used to be a huge JJ guy, just a massive JJ guy. As we've gone on in time, and he's kind of shown he's a bit. I don't want to call him out as a one-trick pony. He's not. He's a smarter guy than that. But he leans into a certain thing that he does. Whether he does it well or not, that is up for discussion.
Sure,
right?
He does, but like
he does, yeah. But Super 8. But now, and when I watch that movie, it has so many things that I love.
Yep.
Right? So it has the thing that I'm nostalgic for, which is a friends group and having fun in that sense. It has Kyle Chandler, which I'm a really big fan of.
Sure.
So I almost have a hard time taking a step back and being like, is that movie actually pretty good?
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, right. I think I have third act problems once the alien gets revealed and their stuff. But I think the rest of that movie is phenomenal. So JJ is a really good one, but I don't know that he's been able to keep that up. And I know like he kind of put himself in a corner in terms of reputation for nostalgia, which was he the perfect person to pump out Force Awakens? Yeah,
absolutely.
Probably.
He was. Yeah.
But was he the guy to do Rise? Probably not.
Yeah. He probably shouldn't have finished that trilogy.
No, I mean, and we probably would have a different discussion if he did the whole trilogy.
Yeah.
Right? If he had a proper plan to finish that out, but the mystery box thing is now overshadowed his ability to curate nostalgia for me and put it in there.
Yeah, that's tough. It is tough. I think that in a lot of ways he does things the way I want nostalgia. Again, Force Awakens is a great example.
Yeah.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, if I know that I'm going to be watching a movie for nostalgia purposes, I want JJ's treatment more than I want Rian Johnson's treatment. I think from the point of view of advancing a story and advancing a universe, Rian Johnson, again, talking about the Star Wars sequels, does a far better job of that than JJ does.
We lost our last listener.
Yeah, there it is. But JJ knows how to scratch an itch.
Not even
Ryan
an itch.
doesn't.
He's just so good at bottling up that feeling.
Oh yeah.
You know, that intangible thing that you can't describe and whatever, and you can put it on the screen and you're like, oh yeah, of course, there it is.
And like, I'm just tying a belt on my arm and like getting a vein.
Yeah.
I'm like, just hit me up. Shoot me right up with it, man.
And I think another guy that does a really good job, and maybe not when we don't really think about a lot, and I don't know how he hasn't come up yet, 7 episodes in or whatever this is Del Toro. That guy makes it. That guy makes movies for himself.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And they just happen to be things that I really enjoy.
Well, it's because he's amazing.
Yeah. So I just think he sticks with what he knows and what he likes, and whether or not they are successful or not, that's up for debate. But he's good at what he does.
Now, do you notice nostalgia with him? Like, 'cause I don't really see it that way. He's absolutely my favorite. Like, if I had to pick a person, he would be Del Toro for favorite director, favorite creator.
Yeah.
But I don't see a lot of nostalgia in his work.
Pacific Rim, that entire movie is a love letter to the things that he used to love, like, and still does. Giant robots, kaiju monsters,
sure,
anime. You know, like, all of those influences are bleeding right through that movie, and that, to me, that's just a movie for 10-year-old Guillermo.
Yeah. I guess my thing is I don't watch a Del Toro film and go, oh, this makes me feel nostalgic.
Yeah, that's fair. Know? But I mean, maybe the difference is I love those things. Like,
sure,
a lot.
But even like Shape of Water is his love letter to Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
And I don't watch that movie and go, oh, I should also watch Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah,
like it feels like a Del Toro.
But again,
film.
maybe that's why it works, is because he's not catering to you. Again, we talked about those guys making movies for themselves.
Yeah,
right, and that's why they don't really care. Like, Tarantino is going to make Kill Bill in spite of everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. He
right?
made it very clear that he wasn't interested in what anyone else had to say.
And everybody kind of ate it up.
Yep.
So I wonder if it's just, when it comes from the right place and from the right, with the right frame of mind and the right person, it works regardless of whether or not you feel nostalgic for it or not.
It's a good point. And I think it's a really good point. Like, I think it's amazing that Tarantino manages to make Pulp Fiction and casts himself in a role where he says the N-word like 20 times in 2 minutes, and then is still beloved.
Yeah.
Like, very clearly it was like, oh, he just wants to be in this movie because he can say the N-word a bunch of times. Okay, cool, man. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of Tarantino. Not a fan of the feet, but like a fan of Tarantino. But like, he has clearly made decisions that are self-serving.
Absolutely.
In a way that doesn't exactly benefit the film either. His scene in Pulp Fiction doesn't really help. Like, yeah, it advances the story, absolutely.
Sure.
But there's no reason it needs to be him. There's no reason that he needs to say the N-word 30 times. So amazingly, being self-serving in a way, being self-serving creatively has been effective for quite a lot of people.
Sure.
Sure. And I think you're right that the nostalgia is truly beneficial, even if we're not feeling it. Like, we don't feel it. Yeah. Tarantino does.
And I think another really good example is Peter Jackson. Right? You can take a look at those two different Lord of the Rings those Tolkien trilogies.
Sure.
One where his heart was completely in it, one where his heart was obviously not.
Yeah.
And it shows.
Yeah,
it absolutely shows. Does. So.
Yeah. I think it comes down to passion, and the passion just isn't in those Hobbit films.
No,
not in the same way. And truly no shade being thrown at Peter Jackson. Yeah. That man caught lightning in a bottle with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Yeah. Like, it frankly astounds me that we were able to get a trilogy that is that high quality.
Yeah. But then he becomes a little bit of a nostalgia chaser, hey? Like when you think about King Kong and the Tintin movies and things of that nature, I'm like, oh, so he's still just trying to make movies for himself, which is admirable.
Yep.
Right? I don't know. I don't remember liking that King Kong movie quite very much.
I liked it, but I think I was like 13 or something. So like that was gonna you're watching King Kong rip open dinosaurs' jaws.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 13-year-old Parker was stoked. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess bottom line we're getting to here is the fact that it seems like if nostalgia is being used for, first of all, for either yourself, like so in the case of Tarantino or Peter Jackson, or we had another one, and
we had Del Toro. We had
Del Toro, sure.
JJ. We were talking about all that stuff.
But so in the case of Peter Jackson, he's using nostalgia for himself. Case of Tarantino as well, but we don't see that. We don't feel that as a
it all comes off like homages, right?
Absolutely.
And that's fine.
And so those typically turn out to be good films in a lot of cases. I think that's a good use of nostalgia. Yeah. The other side of it is that when someone captures a feeling. So JJ is a great example for me, where he captures a feeling that makes the audience nostalgic. So again, Super 8 is a really good example of, that movie makes me nostalgic for E.T.
Yeah.
And wants me, like, it makes me want to embrace that time and be involved with these kids, go on adventures.
Yeah.
But I think that when we start getting into nostalgia for nostalgia's sake, like in Ready Player One, I start having problems, and it's in those cases where I wish creatives would just back off almost,
Yeah, and it's tough because again, I'm a guy that nostalgia is going to work on. Nostalgia is going to work on me. If you re-release a toy that looks exactly like what it did when it was released in 1988 with the same packaging, I'm gonna buy 2 of them.
Oh boy,
I'm the guy. Like I'm your target audience.
You're part of the problem.
I am part of the problem, I know that. Right, so I understand sometimes I'm asking for too much. I don't know that I'm asking for too much, but I think it sucks when it's very obvious what works and what doesn't, and you go out of your way to do the opposite.
Yeah, and I feel like that's in fairness, it's a little reductive. Like it's a little easy for us to sit here and say, but just do the thing that's good, not the thing that's bad. Yeah. But I agree with you. I do think that there's hurdles that are fairly easy to avoid. Yeah. And I think what it comes down to is passion in the work and caring about the story and the characters. And, again, you talk about Del Toro, and that guy very clearly loves everything he's made and he makes, he's talked many, many times about having a box full of scripts that have been rejected or unused by studios. But ready to go, and it's he's poured his heart and soul into stuff, and it's like you said, it's for him. It's not for anyone else. It's not. No one else is. No one sits him down and goes, "Hey, Guillermo, you know what you should do? You should make a movie where this lady fucks a fish monster." And he's like, "Maybe that's a good idea." No, he's just like, "This is what I want to do," and he's like got all the drawings and the anatomy figured out. And, I just mean very clearly he's passionate about filming a woman have sex with a fish monster, and for the benefit of us, obviously,
and for him, got an Academy Award, motherfucker.
Like it's clearly working.
And man, I just wish it would. Sometimes it doesn't translate too, right? Like at the end of the day, we as much as people ride over Crystal Skull, like that's still a Spielberg movie too.
Yep,
it's not like he's not bulletproof.
Oh, far from it.
Right, and maybe his heart wasn't in it, or maybe it was a lot of studio stuff. But even if your heart was in the right place, sometimes it doesn't work out.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if we can end on much better spot than that. Do you have anything else to add, or
no? I think I'm good.
Okay, yeah. I
was gonna try to take another shot at Snake Eyes, but I think I'm done.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. The studio was also very clearly done, and the stars of that film.
Fuck.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming out. Let us know if we missed something for nostalgia, or there's a period of film or types of films that you're nostalgic for that we didn't discuss, or tell us how wrong we are about Rian Johnson. How wrong I am, because
You're not.
Brendan was quite clear that he didn't involve himself as much in those opinions.
No, here's what I'll say. Rian Johnson is one of my favorite filmmakers of all time.
Yeah.
And The Last Jedi is easily the best movie of the sequel trilogy and might be in my top 3 Star Wars movies.
Oh boy!
So if you want to come at Parker, you can come hard at me.
Yeah. Do it. Just at Brendan. Yeah, and let us know in the comments below. And we'll catch you later in the week.